Individuals who have supernatural experiences often fear being negatively judged by others. Individuals who have supernatural experiences are often afraid others will think they're going crazy, and that's not necessarily true.
Developing your supernatural awareness, connecting with an interactive universe. My guest, Dr. Fredrick Woodard. This is an amazing compilation of stories. Beyond belief, out-of-body, near-death experiences with other entities. There's a whole lot of information, so it's hard to condense this into a short interview. But we're going to give you some highlights. Thank you, Dr. Woodard. This is an incredible compilation you've done, and I just want to say there's so much here that it's really hard to make it compact. Why don't you start us off and give us a background?
The background is that I decided to write this book when I came up with the idea of how to interview people from my PhD. I had also earlier on realized that when somebody has an internal experience and then something external happens that's real, that's a good sign that it's a real thing.
You said that you are the person people go to when they have unusual experiences because you don't automatically write it off as a delusion or something that's a medicinal issue.
Right. Those things happen, but those are different.
Some of your clients have obviously doubted themselves and doubted the situation. How do you separate that for them?
The two ideas I said earlier were the idea that they have an internal experience and then it happens in the external world. And it transforms them. It changes them in a way. It doesn't change who they are, but it changes how they relate to things. It's a transformation that you see. For example, I had a woman that was in her 70s and told me her story. And when she was young, in her 20s, she was married and she wanted to die and she wanted to take her 2 kids with her. She was going to the laundromat, and so she asked her husband to go with her, and he wouldn't go with her. And so she went to the laundromat and saw a guy in the laundromat and said, "Oh, good, there's someone there. I'll be safe." And when she walked in, the guy assaulted her, knocked her out cold, and raped her. And she had a near-death experience, and she went to the light, and there was a being there that she knew. And she couldn't remember later, but she knew at the time who it was. She was talking about how the being told her that she could come, but she would have to live her life over again, and that she couldn't take her children because they already had a life they're living. And because of that, that transformed her. That changed her. She didn't want to die. She wanted to be with her children. She wanted to live her life. And she spent the rest of her life doing just that.
Well, the interesting thing about that, too, is one of the police, one of the officers said they had never seen someone survive with that type of strangulation injury.
Yes, that's also true. There was a lot of details. I didn't put them all in. There's a lot of details in all the stories that I just kind of talk about the general ideas.
The thing I found interesting about that, she was basically suicidal, saying, "I'm done. It's over. I'm depressed. This is. I've had enough." And so it's almost like a self-fulfilling. Then comes the individual to help her make that transition, and when she really has to, when it comes down to it, that isn't what she wanted.
Right, and she wanted to be with her children. She wanted to nurture them. She wanted to live her life. She didn't want to do her life over again either. That was a transformation, and I kind of see the transformations in each person's life, how the situation kind of like does something for them.
How many people did you connect with?
In the book, 51, I believe, 51 stories were in the book, I believe.
It's amazing the types, from orbs to entities to near death to out of body to experiences in dreams, where one woman is sharing with you her story about being somewhere else and seeing someone attempt suicide and shouting the voice. And then later on, she finds out that he, I believe the name was Bob, heard and saw her and moved the gun so it just grazed his neck.
Yes, I changed everybody's names.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yes, and that is true. She had an experience where she entered the space in her dream. She was there, and she screamed his name, and that made him like stop. And he had a scar and everything.
And you said afterward that she was more aware of her ability to sense when someone else was suicidal.
Right.
Of all the stories you collected, can you tell me which one was the most surprising to you?
They all had different aspects of surprise, but they were all. But I also had an openness where I didn't judge people, and I listened to their stories, and so there's that aspect too. I've had a lot of other people tell me stories that may or may not be in the book, but there was a couple of stories. One guy told me at the gym, he said, well, I hear you're doing the supernatural awareness and the paranormal stories. And I said, yes, I am researching those. And he said, well, I got to tell you a story. I was on my bike, my motorcycle, and I slid on some sand, and I went down, and I was bleeding a little bit. I heard a voice say in my head, if you want to live, get up right now. And he got up and moved. And if he hadn't moved, the truck went right over that spot.
There's another one you talk
Right.
about, a woman who was going out and driving in a snowstorm, and all of a sudden the windshield wiper flies off.
Oh, yes. And then she didn't know what to do, and there was nobody around. And all of a sudden, there was this young guy that showed up, and he went right over and picked up the windshield wiper, and he unlocked her car because she also had locked herself out of her car. She had her winter coat on, but she locked herself out of her car, and she didn't know what she was going to do. And he came over and he unlocked her car for her, and he found the windshield wiper, and then he was gone before she could even thank him. Really, she thanked him, but she was going to give him a couple of dollars for his time, and he was gone before she could do that.
Yeah, no tire tracks in the snow. And she said he was also dressed, that he wasn't dressed wearing a winter coat or anything.
No, he wasn't.
Possibly a guardian angel.
Yes, could have been. But also there are people that they have coats in their cars, but they don't necessarily wear them when they're driving, you know.
There's one in here about an orb. A woman, I think, was driving along, and this bright light is following the path on the road. That's a unique one.
Oh yes, it was a guy. It was he was driving, and it was an orb that followed the vehicle and went over the vehicle and kept going in the other direction on the road. And yeah, that was an interesting one. And how they responded to it, it was like they barely talked about it to each other.
Yeah. he thought maybe he was the only one who saw it, and then there's somebody else who was in the front seat, and the guy in the back was asleep.
Yeah, right. And yeah, and she mentioned it, and he mentioned it, and then they just let it go. They didn't talk about it very much more. But it was he that described the whole story to me.
These are just fascinating because of some of them that have experiences with somebody else or even a personal experience, and they doubt it enough to say, is it real? Did I really have it? And so how do you help?
Well, the other thing that I did with each chapter 2 through 9 is I tried to get a theme for this chapter. So there was out of the blue, the first thought that comes to your mind, altering time and space, perceiving through feelings and thoughts, interaction with external influences, creatures, perceiving unexpected beings and objects, communicating after death, and ethical supernatural awareness, using your gifts responsibly. At the end of each chapter, I have exercises to help people open up if they want to open up, because the exercises are based on the characteristics from the chapter. For example, the one on feeling things. At the end of the chapter, I have an exercise where try to feel for 15 minutes or throughout the day. Try to feel your way through the day, not see it, not experience it in the normal ways, but try to feel your way through the day.
It's really hard to even imagine some of these experiences that are possible. And that's what I like about the compilation that you've chosen, because it helps each and every one of us understand that these are normal. This isn't something that's an aberration, that we do have these basically out of space, out of time connections that
Right.
I think it says that we haven't begun to even understand our capacity as a human.
Oh, yes, and I believe that is very true. We haven't even begun. We thousands of years from now, they'll look back and say, "Oh my God, they did those things. They medicated people. They did this. They did that. They're going to be like if we advance in the right ways."
Well, it's amazing how much fear there is with some of the stories. It's these are beautiful experiences, and yet there is I think, a lot of fear around: am I normal? Is this okay for me to have had this experience?
Because they're so unusual to the people, and they're like a lot of these people. It's like one or two experiences they had, and that's it. And it's not normal for them. It's not part of what they were told reality was, and so it shakes them up, but they can't deny that it happened. That's the wonderful part of it.
Yeah, that it did happen, and I like that you are able to separate the two and say, okay, if somebody in your reality, the day-to-day living world, corporeal reality, validates your experience, then you can say, yeah, this is something that happened. There's one here about a demon, and I wasn't expecting to find that so clearly illustrated, that she saw a being who was basically ready to harass her cousin, and there were two angels holding the being at bay.
Right. She saw the experience, and then the cousin called up at the end to talk to the aunt and said that it really happened.
That's the validation.
Yes.
When you hear stories like this, aside from, documenting it, writing it down, are there correlations? Are there other stories that are similar patterns?
These are the stories that were given to me, and they were such a wide variety. They weren't the same ones. So it's hard to know. I only have what the people shared with me. So it's like I put it out there so people could connect to it from their experiences, and other writers and such could connect to the ideas too. And other people like yourself, So it's hard to know because I only have what was shared with me. And you can only do so much in a lifetime.
I understand.
And I also tried to be a pioneer, so I did something unusual. I did the phenomenological interviews of people's experiences, which haven't really been done. Nobody really did that, and so I did it, and I'm kind of happy about that. And it simplified them. The wonderful thing about humanistic and phenomenological interviewing is it simplifies the experience down to its basic qualities and basic observations, and it simplifies them. And so that's what I tried to do, share them in a very simple way.
Okay, the language you're using, for those of us who are not in the education field or psychologists, phenomenological.
Yes, that phenomenological and humanistic interviewing taught me to not judge and to simplify the explanations. So like the stories, the way you read them, they're very simple. They're the language is very basic. It's their language.
When I'm looking at some of the stories and seeing, the way that you're describing it, like the person who was watching from above in the corner of the room saying, I'm looking at the lights should be there, the ceiling should be there, but I'm in the ceiling, and so it doesn't make sense that I'm here, but this is what I'm experiencing. Is that an example?
Right. Yes, that's an example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is everyday language to you.
Well, it's like another validating story was the woman that went out to the beach. She was down south getting some medical work done. She went out to the beach, and she went out far enough where she could sing to the dolphins and try to call the dolphins and get the dolphins to come. And she wanted them to come by the pool where she was. And she waited a while, and they didn't come. And then she started to walk in to the beach, and as she got to the beach, all these people stood up, and she turned around, and there were the dolphins right by the pool.
That was cool. I mean, yeah, she just didn't wait long enough.
But they came, and there was a communication, and it's not a usual communication, not what we're taught to do.
Right. Right. There's another one, the animal stories, and this is where the guy was, I can't remember what exactly was wrong, but the bird turns to him and says, it's okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there was that story too, and that was so timely and so perfect that it happened just like that. And I just find those stories, they're incredible.
Do you have more animal stories? It doesn't have to be from the book. Did you have any more that you remember offhand?
Well, an analogy to that was I was walking with a professor and two of my German shepherds down at the rail trails here in my area, and the dogs were sniffing right in front of them, so they were engrossed in what they were doing, and the professor was very attentive to me. He was trying to convince me of something, and 150 feet ahead of me, there were two bobcats that crossed the path, and I noticed them, and I just saw them go up in the woods, and I didn't say anything. And I was aware of something that was going on because I was more open. And that's what I've tried to teach people, to be open and flexible.
You talk about having a Native American connection.
Yes.
And how does that influence you?
I went up and met Charles Shea, who was a key figure in getting the vote turned around. His mother, he was a World War II veteran, and he was in Normandy, and he was literally picking up people that had been shot, and he was never shot. And his mother prayed constantly for his protection, and I met him, and he told me his story, and it was very interesting because one day his mother said, "Put your uniform on, put your medals on. We're going to the town," and they were going to vote. And when they got there to vote, the people there said, "Idiots don't vote. Go home." And she went home and wrote a letter to the President of the United States. Said, "My son can take care of people and save their lives, but we can't vote."
Mm.
And that was changed. It took time, but it was changed. And that was a wonderful thing, a very good blessing that came from him.
Yeah.
And I have that blood in me too. Not as much, but, I have it.
Well, I think that makes a difference, though. The heritage, your basically your ancestry, which it sounds like you tried to incorporate that as you're researching and just exploring other ways of thinking, of experiencing.
Yes. And they include animals. Animals and insects as all my relatives. All the living creatures that exist are their relatives.
When you started researching and you asked, the call went out for people to share their stories, and some are going to be anonymous and some won't mind if they share. Do you think that's a better way to collect the information?
Yes, I think it's protective. It's safe for people, and it's what I think people have a right to their privacy. And if they want to share, they can. It's up to them.
You have a ghost story in here, one where there's a haunted house and they split people up into groups, and well, of course, then the ghost comes forward. Page 167. You want to talk about that one?
Is that the one where the woman is trying to help them cross over?
It's the ghost child and the dead people.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. She was very gifted, and she was very connected. So she was trying to do the right thing. In that chapter, I put people that had gifts and using them correctly was the theme throughout the chapter. So the idea was that there would be places where they could go, they could leave and go to the next place, but they had to go at a certain time because she opened up the door for them, and that was her experience.
For her to be able to see all of the ghosts in the house, that's really unusual.
Yes, there are some of them, being able to see some of them. Yeah, I don't have that. I just see things once in a great while, but they're not like moving and constant.
What are you able to see?
Well, I had an experience where I was in the Concord State Library, and I was trying to make a connection between one of my grandfathers way back in the 1700s, late 1700s, and I couldn't make the connection I had all the people forward to this one and all the people from the back up to this point, but I couldn't connect them. And I was about to give up because there was no alternative. And there was three old men sitting in the corner talking so low you couldn't hear what they were saying. It was just mumbles. And then one of their voices in my head very clearly said, "Check the land deeds." And I went to the Nashua Library for the Mormons, and I ordered the land deeds for that particular town. There was one land deed that I got that literally said the relationship between widow Mary Woodard and her son. That was unusual, incredibly unusual.
Because that determined the son, and that was the father.
I saw that as an experience of like the example of how I would go about like helping people with their experiences, validate them. That if you have an experience and something real happens, it's hard to deny that.
Well, I think that's what you also point out, at least in one of the cases where the woman knows that she had an experience, and no matter what somebody says, like you, I believe this is an OBE experience, and she's looking down at the surgeon and all the things that are going on, and she didn't feel like she was near death. It was just, she was separate from her body, and anybody who says, well, do you think it was the drug? She's like, she doesn't need to worry about that because she knows what she experienced.
Right. Yes, exactly. And yeah, that's what I mean.
I think it's really important for us to become more aware, more educated, more informed that these experiences do happen and they don't make you weird or odd or crazy.
Right, exactly. And that is one of the fears people have. In the 12 examples of common aspects, there is the one that, individuals who have supernatural experiences often fear being negatively judged by others. Individuals who have supernatural experiences are often afraid others will think they're going crazy, and that's not necessarily true. The wonderful thing is that they seek out other people's experiences that are similar to theirs so that they can have something in common.
The thing about your book is that it offers people who go searching for this stuff, usually in paranormal circles or on the spiritualist websites, the opportunity to get a broad spectrum from possibly alien type to ghost to OBE to NDE to things that don't even qualify in any of the above that are transcendent. And it's hard to get all of this wide variety in one source.
Right.
So this was
I had what people gave me, and so I made the chapters. I broke it down into chapters with common stories in each chapter.
Well, I just know, having read all these books for decades and searching for different stories.
Yeah, one of the things I didn't like about reading books were they were all about one thing, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's so many different things. Why doesn't somebody try to put them all together and explain it that way? And that's what I did. But it was because people gave me those stories, because I could only work with what people gave me. If people didn't give me the stories, I wouldn't have been able to put them together.
Oh, this is wonderful. It's wonderful. I mean, because what I have, the broad base, it's UFO, it's spirituality, it's dreams, it's the shamanic element of being in two places at once. And when that woman is talking about being able to see what's happening in her cousin's, as she believes she's dreaming, and seeing these entities with her cousin, that's a shamanic type thing. And that's difficult to find in the spirituality thing, unless you want to go with the demon aspect, and then that's all you get. It's all negative, where this wasn't negative. There's two angels with the demons. I like the fact that this is so, it's very simplified. It's concise. It gets the story across and says, these things happen. She didn't have to be a shaman.
No. And the thing I like about how I went about interviewing people was I would just ask them to say more about something. Like, for example, one woman was talking about driving in her car, and I said, so you were driving in your car, say more about that. Well, I was alone in my car. Well, that was important to know.
Well, you also said the aunt and uncle entered the room. I felt them enter, and then, okay, so what do you mean by that?
The aunt and uncle entered the room with the great aunt and uncle entered the room for this person. They talked to me about how sitting with me, they could feel me. And when their aunt and uncle came in, the great aunt and uncle would come in when they were alive, she would feel them. And then when they came into her place and they weren't alive anymore, she felt them.
Yeah. And that's something that extra sense that sometimes you can call it psychic, or PSI is the phrase used now, or the term for it, extrasensory perception and sensitivity, intuitive, whatever. We're still struggling with how to describe this.
Right. That's true.
How do you say it's an extra sense? Well, how is it extra? It seems to be common. Common.
That's why I used supernatural awareness as an explanation, because I thought that in the current times, what we're doing is we're not able to expand our consciousness or our science to the level that includes all these things. So they're ignored, or they're not replicated, or they're not pointed out. So that's how I did that. I saw it as supernatural awareness, supernatural experiences.
Dr. Fredrick Woodard. The book, Developing Your Supernatural Awareness, Connecting with an Interactive Universe. A quick break. Dr. Fredrick Woodard is a licensed psychologist and certified hypnotherapist. Website, woodardhypnosisandpsychotherapy.org.
You're a resource, and you can also help other people with their own experiences, which I like, okay? So for my own health, personal, exploring how to get answers for things that are basically a non-ordinary experience, I went to a person who is considered a shaman, because I thought, okay, that is away from the medical society, and this is some place that would possibly view my experiences as okay. And I took a friend so that I wouldn't feel in any way self-conscious, because I had someone there beside me. And the shaman helped me disconnect by doing a hypnotic suggestion and getting me into basically from what I term as a disassociative state. Okay, so I'm in this, and the language may not be correct.
Well, one of the things, I have another book, it's called Perceptual Hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And what I talk about in that is that people differentiate. That's what they really do. They see an experience and they focus on it. They don't dissociate. You changed what you were focusing on. That's more real than dissociating, because dissociating implies you're disconnecting from the reality.
All right.
And that's not what you're doing.
That's what I appreciate, a different language. So from that experience, then when I flipped out of my body, which the guides did, I didn't do it. They gave me, at this point, as he's speaking, and my friend is with me, making sure that things are okay. And she's a little bit concerned because it's obvious that I have shifted. I'm out of my body. I'm overviewing the situation. But from the overview, what I see is a black space and a little tiny thing that possibly looks like an egg. It's a multicolored circle with a white thing around it. And I know that's me. And I know that nothing in this reality that I had just separated from exists except for me. That was a basic introduction to a non-ordinary state. Okay, so again, my language may not be professional.
Yeah, it's hard to put in words some of the stuff we experience.
Yeah.
I remember one of the times I was doing self-hypnosis, and I was in my office when I first moved from one office to the next. I felt that I was a ball of light, a ball of energy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't feel myself in the chair, but I knew I was in the room. And that's the best I can describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very deep state.
Yeah. Okay, I'll throw another one. I was meditating. As I'm meditating, I split. This is just by myself. I'm alone, and I'm laying on a bed. I split, and I became, again, out of body, overlooking the state. I'm also in a golden ball of light, like a sun above the body. That little sun is hovering above the solar plexus of my body. I'm able to see that from the ceiling. I'm also aware that I am the body. I'm in 3 states at the same time, and aware that all of these states are part of me.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so we don't have language to describe all of that.
No, we don't.
But I tell you, once you feel it, it's really cool.
Yes, and there are examples of people that have touched on some of these things and said it in a way that it really made sense. But it's not all the time.
Well, I think it's because, these experiences I'm describing, they happen maybe 10, 15 years apart. This isn't a normal everyday thing. These were transcendent for me. The first one was actually that Trinity state, the 3, and seeing myself as an orb and knowing that I could see without eyes as a hovering form in the corner of the room. That was transformational. I'm like, oh, wow, there's more to me than just that physical body. Now, having been told or learned or reading about that didn't make sense until I actually went into that state. And then later on, working with a shaman and having my guides throw me out of my body and tell me, you are working on this particular stuff. So they gave me 7 things I was working on during this lifetime. As they're telling me that, while the other 2 people, the shaman and my friend, are in the room and completely unaware of what I'm experiencing in that out-of-body state. These things are, I don't think they happen every day, and that's what's so frustrating when you are experiencing and trying to study them. It's like when somebody meditates and has that transformative state. That's what they want to do that again, and it doesn't work, at least for most people. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and that's why Abraham Maslow was a psychologist, and he had mentioned peak experiences where somebody would, and I can't even remember his wording perfectly, but it was something to the effect of somebody would have an experience and it would stay with them for the rest of their lives because it was so real compared to everyday life experience.
Yeah. The thing about that being so real is that you continue to work with it and explore it and look at it from different directions of, well, what did this mean at this point in my life? What was I doing? And how does it influence me today? Because it didn't go away. It's still part of my my history and back in the archives of what I pull out to validate and let me understand other people have these experiences too. And I don't discount them because they're not going to be the same as mine, but they're still going to be
But,
something that's transformative for that person.
and I think it's very personal. It's like for each person, it's a real experience for them. So it's not supposed to be like exploited by everyone else. And that's what I mean by the privacy of people, the right to their privacy or their experiences. Because if they want to share, that's one thing. But the idea that they're for those people, they're for them, they're to help them.
Well, there's also the thing of, when your relatives or your family or your social group, your friends or your peers or your coworkers hear about things like that and they're not on board, then it can get complicated.
Yeah, that's where it gets negative, yeah.
Yeah.
The negative aspect that other people try to deny it, and that does happen. It doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen as much as it does, but it does. And I think it's out of fear that those people fear the experience, and they don't have anything to relate it to. I had a little section in the end of my book on skeptics, and it's pretty much that they don't have any experiences to relate to be able to experience what you're talking about.
Or they've been taught that anything like that challenges their own belief is...
They're not open enough.
Yeah, it's a threat. It's threatening.
Either.
So that's, again, fear-based belief system. And you also you talk about when you open your spiritual awareness, you're opening up to these other elements that can sometimes make you vulnerable.
Yes, it can. I remember when I was 18, I was in college and I was going to school and I was living in my own place, and I got this flyer from a local clinic that was doing UFO stuff and other stuff, and I said, "Oh my God, this stuff's crazy." But then I started to open up to it because of experiences I had and stories people told me, and even my grandfather had told me some stuff that he had experienced, like he felt that he was healed after he had a heart attack, and he lived to be 89, 91, something like that. And he outlived my grandmother. He had a heart attack in his 50s.
So who healed him?
He felt it was a spiritual thing.
In the book, you talk about a guy who was having surgery, or I can't remember what the issue was. I'm sorry, there's so many stories. But he felt this energy come into him and say, I want you to live.
Yes.
What was that?
Yeah, that's that kind of energy. Same kind of energy. It's something. It's personal. Each one is personal. I can't say that I know each situation perfectly, but the person experience is opened up to something outside of themselves that helped them.
He definitely knew it wasn't him, and he describes the light coming in, and and that's really, again, getting into difficult to describe, but this light that just came in, and all of a sudden he felt, and I will say infusion, I'm putting language to this, of this energy, and then the words, and all of a sudden, knowing it was going to be okay.
Yep. Yes, and that's true. Yes, and I think if it's the person I'm thinking about, they had surgery and then they didn't have anesthesia, and then the pain was awful, and then they were healed from that.
That's right. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so with these kind of experiences, are you hoping to compile more stories? Are they still coming in?
Yes, I may do another one, but this is the thing I wanted to do, was to get out something that helps people just connect more with each other, and it's like a guide for examples for opening up more, examples of stories that people have had, and it'll get people to do more of this themselves.
Well, and you call it developing your supernatural awareness. That's really it. That's what it's about, becoming more sensitive, more educated, more accepting that these things
Yes.
are possible. That's it. And I think that there's one point when, I like the pictures that you've chosen to use too. The one with the dolphins. I love when she calls in the dolphins. And there's another one though with the entity, and then this is at the end of the book, where be sure to protect yourself. How do you protect yourself? Because that's usually a question people, just put your white light around you. And is there something you suggest?
Yeah, I have an exercise in my first book, which is Perceptual Hypnosis. The exercise in that book is something I use, and it's to put a light around yourself and then see sparkles kind of like taking away the negativity and absorbing it and destroying it.
Okay, so that's even beyond, that's just saying that this will transmute or nullify whatever other energy that is counter.
Right, and the light is ancient. It was before Franz Mesmer was the father of hypnosis, and it was 1500s. It was a doctor. It was a medical doctor who was a priest, he was a priest, and he wrote an exercise, and I said, "Oh my God, that's a CBT exercise today." But it was written in 1500.
Yeah, so timeless, basically.
Yes, and those experiences of the light is incredible.
Yeah.
The protective light that people see that you mentioned when you had your experience, the light being around. That's the thing.
Well, I like what you also talk about. And so remote viewers, I've seen some of this. Some of these little tips come from all these little nooks and crannies of whether you're, talking about the near-death experiencer, the OBE experiencer, the remote viewer, the mediumship, all that stuff. There's one in here that is, I think, universal. When you are aware or you're sensitive, you're more able to discern, this thought isn't mine. Where is this thought coming from? And I think that also has to do with when they're talking about being able to manifest or focus. You're getting rid of the extraneous, the monkey mind, and getting into the core of who am I? And these are my thoughts. And then you're better able to identify, this is an entity that shouldn't belong here. Or this is the woman who went into the room and felt all of a sudden angry and upset and tension because somebody had just had, as you describe in one of the stories, there'd been an argument in the room. She walks in, she feels the space, and all of a sudden, whoa,
yes.
What's this about? That's helpful.
Yes, absolutely, yes. That was someone I knew that told me a story about that, and they experienced the anger and felt it, and it was outside of them, and they were able to identify that, and that was wonderful.
See, some of those to me that's like a residual that's left there, or it can also develop into a thought form. Those are my experiences, that there can be a thought form. And that's a non-corporeal entity who's in the space, occupying the space, but it doesn't have anywhere else to go. But it might be influencing the person or people who live in the space. It is so frustrating that we do not have a general understanding that these things exist and that we can counter them and eliminate that from our environment. That's frustrating.
The funny thing is, there are places where that does exist. And one of the things I learned was, as a psychologist, was I was training at a clinic, and I went on my break and after seeing the client, and I said to one of my supervisors, I said, "God, I'm so tired right now." I said, "Tired? Why are you tired?" I said, "I don't know. I'm always tired at this time on this day." And he said, "Rage. Your client has rage." And it was an older woman that was very passive in how she was describing things. And yet, when I went back and looked at it the next time, I realized he was right. There was a lot of anger. It was very passively being distributed, and it was wearing me out.
Yeah.
And I learned to not take that on.
Right.
So I felt a lot better after he explained to me what was going on, and I didn't just take it on. And I realized what was going on, and I was able to protect myself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that took effort, but there aren't a lot of people that know that. There are some people that do realize those things,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a lot of people.
It felt better for her because she's able to let go of some of that for a little while. And,
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so she's diffusing that overwhelming rage by basically telling or transmitting it without intention to you. She isn't intending to dump that on you, but it's part of her space. So for her, this isn't unusual. This is her way of navigating. And then you're
Right. And what I did is I made her aware of it.
yeah.
And I helped her realize what she was doing so she could stop it from affecting her,
Yeah.
and stop it from affecting other people.
Yeah. It becomes a toxic space. So people don't understand that anger, and yes, there was a study just recently, here we go, finally now saying anger is toxic to your system, anger is not good for your heart. Well, duh. So when you're
Right.
angry, it actually hurts you first. It hurts your body first. So that might be helpful when people are being told this is something that you need to manage, anger management, stress management, because
Yes.
the body is saying this isn't helping.
Yes, that's very true. Some people learn to do that, and some people don't. The people that don't get very sick.
When you talk to this guy who immediately identified it as rage, what is that called? Someone who has that ability to understand, okay, this is what's happening, because I think that would be helpful for more people to know that there are people who
Well,
can.
he was my supervisor, so he was trained in those things.
Okay.
He was teaching us to be able to manage those things, so he was like guiding me.
Yeah. So
And that was his job.
I think those things some people take for granted, though, that, hey, this is an ability that might be more prevalent in our society without the doctorate, with that other people can identify this is what's happening to
Well,
you.
yes, I think it happens all the time. In that case, the example was the client, the research participant that I used, that was that talked about going into the room and then feeling the anger. That was pure, like, natural.
Mm-hmm.
There was no skill involved. She just figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people, when they go into a space, whether it's at work or if you're buying a house or if you're going into a grocery store, a library, there are certain spaces when all of a sudden you feel cold, you feel uncomfortable, you can even feel happy. But these other feelings, that's why I'm going back to say, when you identify, these are my thoughts, then you can pick up on why am I feeling weird here? What is this that doesn't make sense? Why is it unusual? What is odd? And then you're able to, I think, become more conscious in your actions, period. But knowing what belongs to you and what doesn't is extremely helpful.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I try to do with the book, is try to get those messages out there.
So that's in part of the section here. I'm going to just say a page 195. We are saying, notice when you have unusual thoughts or images that are uncommon for you to experience. And that's, going to a new house is one of the things you actually, you highlight. And be aware of forces that take rather than give. And what's that like?
That's an experience that some people understand. And when they do, they realize what's going on.
Well, it's when you have a friend and the friend constantly talks to you on the phone and you get off the phone and you're absolutely exhausted and they won't let you go. And it's like, no, I've got another story. And you finally have to disconnect and say, okay, I've got to cook dinner, whatever. The cat is going to the bathroom in the corner.
Right.
Because they are so desperate to continue the conversation. And yet what they're doing is unloading and you are collecting. So I'm giving an example of a real life experience of a friend who had no idea that that was happening. But boy, it was hard to disconnect. And then having the feelings afterwards of, my gosh, what did I just take on?
Right. That's true.
Back to protecting yourself. Is this something you do every day?
Well, it's something that you do every day, but it eventually, if you do it right, you realize that the protection is always there.
Once you become aware of setting this boundary, then it's
Right.
autopilot.
And when you set it, you should be saying to yourself, it's always there. It's not just there when I need it. It's always there. It's always protecting me. And that kind of works. I know that I had an experience once when I was working in a prison, and I was working with a guy who was very evil, and he had tried to kidnap a woman and sacrifice her, but he didn't succeed, and he was in jail. And so he said to me one day, he said, you're protected. Whatever I do, whatever my friends do, comes back to us. You've been protected. And I was like, well, that's good.
Thank you for that assessment. I needed that corroboration.
Yes.
By him saying that, that gives you a clue. There are people out there who do this just for fun.
Right, there are. And I had one in my book toward the end in the ethical chapter that was a guy that went into crowds and took energy from people. And he said, I have a right to do that because they don't protect themselves.
Yeah, ethics and integrity. Okay, well, just FYI, that comes back to bite you, all right? It does come back to bite you.
I know that, and I told him, he said, he did say in the interview, and I put it in the book, he said, you're going to tell me that's wrong. And I said, yes, I am. And I did. But he did it because he believed that if they didn't protect themselves, he had a right to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. It's his karma.
Right.
I think that kind of belief system is toxic and counterproductive. So my own experience.
In other ways, he wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that in other ways, but in that particular one, he did.
But that's also good to know, because by his misconduct, by him running amok, we get to say, oh my gosh, yeah, a realization that there are some people who this is for them natural because it's out there. It's free. I don't have to worry about it. It's your job to protect yourself. And then you think, oh my gosh, there's somebody who thinks that way. I didn't know. So we learn from that. My experience was as somebody who tried to attack me and I was going to reciprocate and respond and attack back. I had already escaped and I was okay. But when I was thinking in my mind and ready to strike out to basically, in my mind, prevent anybody else from being attacked by this person, the person, non-seen, non-corporeal entity, spirit guardian, whatever you want to call it, guardian angel, out loud said, karma. And I'm like, well, okay, you were here all along. My thought was, yeah, now you speak up. But as this person that, the attacker went off into the night, I'm like, oh. And what the message was the contract between you and that entity, that being, is over. If you attack, because now it's attack, it's not preventing. I'd already done what I needed to protect myself. But by me then returning that, then I would be basically re-engaging. And so the karma was to prevent me from striking the match again. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
So with that immediately gave me an idea for people who say there is no karma. Well, apparently there is.
Well, yeah, there always is karma. There always is karma, but you just got to let that stuff take care of itself. But yeah. The thing is, it doesn't mean you can't be hurt.
Right. Yeah. Well, and one way or the other, I would not have had that experience to be able to look back on and reflect if I hadn't had the encounter. So the encounter to me was instructional, and it was educational, and it was scary, but it was a learning curve of, oh wow, because the things that happened during the experience were absolutely transformational, incredibly transformational, and
Right.
knowing that other things around me during that whole time were happening on a non-physical space, but changing my reality, period. So that's what these stories that you bring into focus in your book, Developing the Supernatural Awareness. I love the fact that we learn from all of these stories. Each and every one is a gem in itself.
Yes. Yep.
So in other words, would you please keep having people tell their stories, and please keep sharing them, because having the wide variety of these experiences gives us a clue into human nature, into our own species of what is possible with our mind, with our thoughts, with our experiences, our awareness. Each of these stories has something. It speaks, to a different person, a different personality, a different lifestyle, a different awareness. And that's what I think is so helpful.
Each person can get different things from it too. Like some of the stories have so many details. It's like some of the details can affect one person, and some of the other details can affect a different person.
For anybody who has questions, you do help people, correct?
Right.
And
Yep.
You're known as somebody who's non-judgmental.
Yes.
You said that your grandfather had that healing experience, and you've had other experiences. Is there one you'd like to share?
One of the ones I had was I went into a store when I was an undergrad in college, and I went into a store to get a soda, and I was thinking about my uncle who died in the war. I thought, well, maybe he's not really there. And then I went to get the soda, and in the change, I got a World War II nickel, which was incredibly rare to get.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me realize, don't judge, don't say anything, just acknowledge that it's, you'll have to wait until the time comes when you're there. I also had an experience where I had this woman that was going to do a reading for me, and then take me to see this channeler who was a black woman, an older black woman, who was incredibly gifted. And it was a couple hours away, and I was young. I was an undergrad then, too. So I drove down to this woman's house, and the place was not that far from her house. She was going to do a reading for me and then make dinner, and then we were going to go. And she just kept trying to hit on me the whole time. And I didn't want that. And I just kept saying no, no. And so then we had dinner, and we went to the channelers, and she started to go up the stairs to go to the bathroom, and she screeched and said, "Oh my God, that was a nail. It went through my shoe." And the channeler wheeled around and looked at her and said, "That was a warning. You never use spiritual knowledge for your own gain."
Uh-huh.
And then she looked at me and she said, "And that was for you to witness." And I didn't take it like it was a pat on the back. It was more, "Don't you do that."
Wow.
Then she proceeded to talk about my uncle without any knowledge of knowing me at all, who I was or anything. She said, "There's a man in a uniform, and he protects you, and he looks out for you." But that moment was so real, and there was no way that could have been faked. She definitely knew what was going on.
When it hits home, that's really all you need. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Each person has their own ability to, I think, become more aware and evolve with their own spirituality. And this book will give you ideas of what else is possible and what other people have experienced, so you don't have to question, well, is this weird? Am I crazy? No, look at this. This is normal. This is part of human nature. We just haven't been taught as much as we need to know that will help us understand and incorporate this element as part of our normal reality.
That's the reason I wrote it.
Was there anything you would like to add?
Like I said, developing your supernatural awareness. The title captures the experience of the book, and connecting with an interactive universe. And the universe is limitless.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate your information. I love the book, and I'm looking forward, hoping that you will continue because you have a good archive to draw from. These stories are incredibly helpful. The website?
Woodard Hypnosis and Psychotherapy.org.
Links are in the description for the show. Thanks for listening.